Yeah, I'm breaking some of the rules here. We are talking about Montreal and Vancouver in this video because this is huge. Later today, the Montreal Canadiens will be playing in the most important game of the season. Yeah, baby, that's exactly it. It's always games against St. Louis, right? They're the most important ones that my favorite teams have to offer because the Habs and the Blues will be playing off later today at, what's it going to be, 5 p.m. PST, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and with the current situation of the wild card shaping up in both the West and the East, this is an absolutely huge game. For me, because I'm a Canucks and a Canadiens fan, this game is important on two fronts. Because if you take a look at the NHL wild card standings, you can see right here that the St. Louis Blues are indeed ahead of Vancouver with 81 points in 72 games played. The Blues have been on a heater as of late, 8-1-1 in their last 10. They've won 6 games in a row. And they have just been an absolute force throughout the NHL. Not to mention the fact that they have an easy schedule to end off this season. That definitely makes things a little easier for them. But then if you head over to the East, you can see the Montreal Canadiens hanging on to that final wildcard spot right here. They've got 75 points in 69 games played. Less games than New York, Columbus, and Detroit, but more points. So the Habs, with their 5-1-4 record in their last 10, sure, they've been losing in overtime quite a bunch recently, but they have been getting the points they need to hold on to that second wild card as much as they can. And so now, you take a look at it, the Vancouver side of me is hoping that Montreal wins in regulation, preferably, so that St. Louis does not keep on acquiring those points, and the Habs fan in me is like, hey, the Habs need their own points, they need to get themselves up ahead of the competition. Both the New York teams are coming from behind, and the Blue Jackets are 2 points away too. It's a tight race on both fronts here, and if we head over to moneypuck.com, this is where some of the numbers really paint a picture as to how tight everything is. If Montreal beats St. Louis, their playoff odds jump 10.6%. They go to 59.6. That's if they beat St. Louis in regulation or in overtime. Doesn't matter here on the tiebreaker. It does seem like it's just get the points, get the win, and you'll be okay. If the Montreal Canadiens lose to St. Louis in regulation, their playoff odds drop 9.8%, 39.3 total. And then if the Canadiens lose to St. Louis in overtime, they get a point, but they don't get 2. Their playoff odds stay exactly the same at 49%. 0% change positively or negatively. It's kind of interesting. I don't think I've ever seen that before, where the playoff odds stay the same based off of one result. But ultimately, the Habs are in a pretty good spot if they win against St. Louis. I'm hoping that it's the gosh darn Canadiens that are able to pull it off, man. I've been watching the St. Louis team just peripherally, taking a look at some of their games, looking at the highlights. They've been dominant. I have Dylan Holloway and Braden Shen on some of my fantasy teams, so obviously watching those guys tear it up has been quite the riot. But St. Louis, especially in their win against Vancouver a few days ago, they've been finding ways to win, man, and they've been getting a lot of points. So Montreal, please stop the gosh darn Blues in their tracks. This is also a huge game for the St. Louis Blues. Their playoff odds are above 50% at the moment. If they beat Montreal in regulation, their odds jump up 8.3% to 62.6. If they beat Montreal in overtime, their odds go up to 60.4. That's up 6.1% compared to the 54 they're at right now. If the Blues lose to Montreal in regulation, their odds dip 13.7% down to 40.6. And if they lose to the Habs in overtime, their odds drop 3.4% down to 50.9. So St. Louis, obviously the most ideal situation for my Vancouver Canucks is a St. Louis regulation loss because they do have 72 games played. They have more games than all of these other teams vying for that Western wildcard. So that's maybe the only negative for St. Louis at this time. Obviously, the schedule has been very helpful for them, especially with those games against Chicago and Nashville. But ultimately, the St. Louis Blues, if they lose today in regulation, that will be the best case scenario for both my Canucks and my Canadiens. Of course, I mean, I guess the overtime win versus regulation win doesn't really matter for Montreal, but for St. Louis, they need those points, and if they get deprived of 2 here today, that would be super, super helpful. The Canucks do play off against the Islanders and then the Blue Jackets later in the week, so hey, there's a little bit of an Eastern swing here for Vancouver. Help out the Canadiens, why don't ya, by holding off some of these teams from getting points too. It's a symbiotic relationship, folks. Montreal helps Vancouver by potentially beating St. Louis in regulation today, and then Vancouver maybe helps out the Habs by winning against the Islanders and Columbus the next few days here. Of course, nothing is guaranteed. There's absolutely no guaranteed chance that Vancouver even wins those upcoming games, especially with the way they've been playing the past little while here. They've been playing decently well, but they haven't been getting as many wins as they probably should have, and I think that New York Rangers game is the biggest culprit of that. But hey, if you wanted to go off of the money puck model, this is what they have for the game tonight. They have Montreal at a 41.5% chance of winning. Sammy Montembeault is the starter as confirmed by the Canadiens' Twitter account. And the Blues have a 58.5% chance of winning, with Jordan Binnington getting confirmed earlier this morning by Rutherford. It's kind of a tough matchup here, man. 58.5%. The Habs have a pretty bad spread on this game here. We'll see what happens. But ultimately, you know, St. Louis gets the last change. It is their hometown crowd. They've been buzzing the past few weeks. But if there's going to be a team to potentially spoil St. Louis and their 8-1 and whatever record in the past 10 games, hopefully it's Montreal. This St. Louis team needs another gosh darn regulation loss, please. And you know what's funny? Now I'm looking at the standings one more time. I'm thinking about it from the Vancouver perspective. They've got 12 overtime losses, this Vancouver Canucks team does. And they're down by 3 points. If they just won like an extra 4 or 5 games in overtime or shootout, then they would have been able to overtake St. Louis easy. But, you know, I guess that's just the way the cookie crumbles. Regulation losses be damned, Vancouver loses in overtime, baby. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about this huge game for the St. Louis Blues, the Montreal Canadiens, and how the Vancouver Canucks are equally important in this game's verdict here. What are your thoughts on the standings and the wild card leading into this game here? Let me know what you think. I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.